My son called his wife a fat pig in minutes before the wedding, and the cameras caught who was laughing behind her. What I discovered later shattered me in ways I never imagined possible. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would. And if you, for just a second, feel like this sounds familiar, I only ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me to keep unburdening my soul. My name is Carol, I'm 64 years old, and on that Saturday in May in New York City, I woke up with my hands trembling with excitement. It was my son David's wedding day. I had dreamed of this moment since he was a little boy, imagining what it would be like to see him in a suit, promising eternal love, building the family I always wanted him to have. I got up before dawn, as I always have. I brewed coffee in the old mocha pot I inherited from my mother, the one that makes a particular gurgling sound when the water boils. The aroma filled my small apartment in Astoria, Queens, the same apartment where I raised David after his father left us when he was 12. As I got dressed, I remembered all the times I sacrificed my own dreams for him. I worked double shifts at Mr. Henderson's bakery for years to pay for his private university. I sold my grandmother's jewelry to afford his MBA. I never went on vacation, never bought myself new clothes that weren't strictly necessary. Everything for him. The dress I chose for the wedding was navy blue, the same one I wore at my own wedding 30 years ago. I had altered it to fit me, because at 64, after so much work and so much pain, my body was no longer the same. My hands, rough from kneading dough and cleaning houses, trembled as I put on the earrings David gave me last Christmas. For the best mom in the world, he had said then, hugging me tightly. Those words echoed in my mind as I locked the door to my apartment and walked to the subway that would take me to the Plaza Hotel, where the ceremony would be held. During the subway ride, I watched the families out for their Sunday strolls. Children running, parents carrying shopping bags, grandmothers with tired but loving smiles. I thought about how proud I would feel walking on David's arm, introducing myself as the mother of the groom. Finally, after so many years of struggle, my son had found love. Lucy was a sweet girl, from a good family. Her father owned a chain of restaurants in downtown Manhattan. The first time I met her, she brought me flowers and kissed my cheeks with genuine affection. "Mrs. Johnson," she had said, "David has told me so much about you. You're the strongest woman I know." Those words had filled my heart in a way I hadn't felt in years. When I arrived at the hotel, the contrast was brutal. The lobby glittered with golden marble and crystal chandeliers that cost more than everything I had earned in my life. Elegant women in designer dresses and shoes that clicked with the sound of money on the floor. Men in suits that screamed success from every seam. And there I was, Carol Johnson, widow, retired baker, with my mended dress and my comfortable shoes bought at a discount store in Queens. Lucy's mother, Hope Caldwell, greeted me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was a woman my age, but one who had clearly had access to beauty treatments I didn't even know existed. Her taut skin, her perfectly colored platinum blonde hair, her nails like tiny works of art. "Ah, you must be Carol," she said, looking me up and down with barely concealed disdain. "I was hoping you'd be a bit more dressed for the occasion." I felt the heat rise up my neck, but I smiled. I had learned to swallow humiliation from a young age. "The important thing is that David and Lucy are happy," I replied in the firmest voice I could find. Hope laughed, the kind of laugh that sounds like breaking glass. "Happy? With the inheritance David is getting from his paternal grandfather, I'm sure they will be. $50 million buys a lot of happiness, don't you think?" I froze. Inheritance? What inheritance? David's father had abandoned us, leaving nothing but debts and broken hearts. He had never mentioned money, or inheritances, or grandfathers with fortunes. "I'm sorry, but I think there's been some misunderstanding," I started to say. "Misunderstanding?" Hope arched a perfectly waxed eyebrow. "Darling, don't you know your son is going to inherit the Harrison fortune? Didn't he tell you his paternal grandfather died last month and left him everything? That's why my daughter is marrying him. For love, yes, but also for good business sense." The world tilted beneath my feet. David hadn't told me anything. Nothing about an inheritance, nothing about a millionaire grandfather, nothing about the real reasons for this wedding being held in a hotel that cost more than my entire apartment. As I tried to process this information, a waiter passed by offering glasses of champagne. I took one with trembling hands and headed to where I was supposed to sit, in the front row, alone, like the single mother I had always been. But before I reached my seat, I heard voices coming from the groom's dressing room. Male laughter, the tone of my son's voice. I drew closer, thinking I'd greet him before the ceremony, tell him how proud I was. And then I heard it. I stood frozen against that marble wall, feeling every word that came out of my son's mouth tear me apart inside. But it wasn't just the pain of hearing him humiliate Lucy. It was the horror of recognizing his father's voice in every one of his cruel words. For 24 years, I had fought to keep David from becoming the man who abandoned us. And I had failed. I closed my eyes and went back to that February night in 1999. David was 12 years old and crying in my bed because he had heard his father yelling at me in the kitchen, "I'm sick and tired of supporting a fat, useless slob and her brat." It was the same night Richard Harrison packed his bags and left with his 23-year-old secretary, leaving us without a dollar and with 3 months of overdue rent. That night, I held David as he sobbed against my chest. "Mom, why does Dad hate us?" he had asked with that broken voice children have when they discover the world isn't the safe place they thought it was. "He doesn't hate us, honey," I lied, stroking his brown hair. Adults sometimes get confused and say ugly things when they're sad. How was I supposed to explain to a 12-year-old that his father was a coward who saw us as an obstacle to his new life? From that night on, I worked like a dog to make sure David wanted for nothing. I would get up at 4 in the morning to go to Mr. Henderson's bakery in Astoria. I needed bread until 2 in the afternoon, then rushed home to make David's lunch and help him with his homework. At 5, I cleaned offices downtown until 10 at night. On weekends, I cleaned houses in Greenwich, Connecticut, in those gated communities where the women looked at me as if I were invisible while I scrubbed their marble floors. 7 days a week, 365 days a year. No vacations, no rest, no life of my own. Also, David could go to Fordham Prep, the same school where the children of wealthy New York families went. My son is going to have opportunities, I would tell myself as I counted the wrinkled bills I earned each week. He's not going to suffer like I have. When David turned 16, he wanted a pair of Nike sneakers that cost $250. I made $800 a month. I sold the engagement ring my mother had left me, the only valuable memento I had of her. David wore the shoes and never asked me where the money came from. At 18, he wanted to go on a senior trip to Cancun with his classmates. The trip cost $2,000. I worked cleaning houses over Christmas and sold my grandmother's china to get the money. David went to Cancun and brought back a picture of himself smiling in front of the beach. "It was the best trip of my life, Mom," he told me. I smiled and didn't tell him that I had spent that Christmas eating canned lentils to save every dollar. For college, he wanted to study business administration at NYU, one of the most expensive universities in New York. Tuition was $50,000 a year. I took out a loan that took me 5 years to pay off, working double shifts at the bakery until I got varicose veins in my legs and arthritis in my hands. Every day, when I came home exhausted, David would greet me with complaints. "Mom, there's nothing I like to eat. Mom, my friends are going skiing in Aspen and I can't go. Mom, I need a new laptop for school." Never a, "Thank you." Never a, "How are you?" Never a, "Let me help." For his master's degree, David wanted to study at Wharton in Philadelphia. "It's the best business school in the country, Mom. Without it, I won't get a good job." The program cost $80,000. I sold the last of my mother's jewelry and took out another loan that I'm still paying off at 64. When David graduated, he got a job at a major consulting firm. His starting salary was $3,000 a month, more than I had ever made in my life. I thought I could finally rest a little, that my son would help me with expenses, that we could live together more comfortably. But David moved into an apartment on the Upper East Side. "I need my independence, Mom. I can't live with you forever." On Sundays, he would come over for dinner. I'd make his favorite dish, meatloaf, the same recipe I had learned from my mother. After eating, he'd sit on the couch watching TV while I cleared the plates. Before leaving, he'd open the fridge and take Tupperware containers filled with food for the week. "I just don't know how to cook, Mom," he'd say with a smile that no longer seemed innocent. "Besides, nobody cooks like you." When I turned 60 and retired from the bakery, my Social Security check was $800 a month. David was already making $5,000 a month at his new job in a multinational corporation. I mentioned to him that my check barely covered rent and food. "Mom, you need to learn to manage your money better," he replied without looking up from his phone. "I have a lot of expenses, my apartment rent, the car, business dinners. I can't be supporting you." Supporting me? After 24 years of supporting him, David was telling me he couldn't support me. Last year, when I was diagnosed with diabetes and needed to buy expensive medication, I asked him for help. "Mom, there are generic drugs that cost less. You can't expect me to pay for brand name medicine." 6 months ago, when my washing machine broke and I didn't have the money for a new one, I asked him to lend me $300. "I'll pay you back in 3 months when I get my tax refund," I promised. "Mom, $300 is $300. If you can't afford a washing machine, wash by hand like our grandmothers did." But yesterday, when David called to invite me to his wedding, his voice sounded different. Affectionate. Almost sweet. "Mom, I want you to look beautiful at my wedding. I'll stop by tomorrow and give you some money to buy a nice dress. It's going to be the most important day of my life, and I want you to be perfect." I was so moved that I cried. Finally, after so many years, my son was thinking of me, wanting me to feel special. But David never stopped by. He never gave me money for the dress. When I called him that night, he said he'd had a work dinner and forgot. It's okay, Mom. Just wear that blue dress you have, that one looks good on you. That's why I was here, at the Plaza Hotel, in my 30-year-old dress, listening to my son call the woman he was about to marry in 5 minutes a fat pig. And for the first time in 24 years, I wondered if I had raised a monster. I pushed myself away from that wall, my legs trembling, my heart shattered into a million pieces. I had to get away before someone saw me crying. I walked towards the hotel restrooms, those pink marble bathrooms with gold-plated mirrors that looked like they belonged in a palace. I locked myself in a stall and cried silently, biting my knuckles to keep from making a sound. David's words echoed in my head like a broken record, fat pig, out of charity, just like my old man did with my mother. How had it come to this? How had I failed so badly as a mother? I came out of the stall to wash my face and try to compose myself. I couldn't ruin my son's wedding, even though he had ruined my heart. In the mirror, I saw a 64-year-old woman, her face swollen from crying, in a dress that had seen better days, with hands chapped from a lifetime of work. You're pathetic, Carol, I whispered to myself. After everything you've done for him, you're still protecting him. When I returned to the ballroom, the music had already started. The guests rose from their seats as Lucy walked down the aisle on her father's arm. She was beautiful in her lace gown, but I could see she had been crying. Her eyes were puffy beneath the perfect makeup. Had she also heard David's comments? David waited at the altar with that perfect smile he had inherited from his father, a smile I once thought was one of happiness but now recognized as the smirk of a predator satisfied with his prey. The officiant began the ceremony. Beautiful words about love, fidelity, mutual respect. Every word sounded like a mockery after what I had heard. How could David promise love and respect when 5 minutes earlier he had called the woman about to become his wife a fat pig? When it was time for the vows, David spoke with a firm, clear voice. Lucy, I promise to love you in sickness and in health, for richer or for poorer, until death do us part. A lie. It was all a lie. David didn't know what it was to love, what it was to sacrifice for someone. He only knew how to take and take until he left people empty. Lucy stammered a little during her vows. Her voice trembled. David, I promise. I promise to be your faithful partner, in all of life's moments. Poor girl. She had no idea what she was getting into. When the officiant said the words, "You may now kiss the bride," David kissed Lucy with a theatrical passion that drew applause from the crowd. But I saw something the others didn't. I saw how David's eyes remained cold while his lips feigned love. During the cocktail hour, I tried to approach Lucy to talk to her, but she was surrounded by family and friends congratulating her. Every time our eyes met, she quickly looked away. David didn't come over to greet me all afternoon. He didn't even look at me. It was as if I were invisible, as if after 24 years of raising him, I no longer existed for him. I sat alone at a table in the back of the room, the one reserved for distant family. Next to me sat a great aunt of Lucy's who didn't speak English and a distant cousin who spent the entire dinner on his phone. I watched the other guests, businessmen in $3,000 suits, women with jewelry that cost more than my apartment, young people with watches worth more than I had earned in my entire life. They all talked about business, investments, properties in the Hamptons. No one talked about love. During dinner, Lucy's father stood up to give a speech. He spoke of the excellent union of two prosperous families, of the businesses that would flourish thanks to this alliance, of the grandchildren who would inherit an empire. An empire? What empire was he talking about? I had raised David in a 2-bedroom apartment in Queens, working in a bakery. What empire had my son built that I knew nothing about? Then David's best man, Chris, spoke, the same one who had laughed when my son called Lucy a fat pig. In his speech, Chris told anecdotes from college, about parties, about trips they had taken together. But there was one line that sent a chill down my spine. David has always known what he wants and how to get it. Since he inherited his grandfather's fortune, he's proven he knows how to handle money as well as the opportunities that come his way. Every head turned towards David, who was smiling with false modesty. Some guests laughed as if they understood a private joke. But I didn't understand anything. What inheritance? What grandfather? Richard's father had died when David was a boy, and we never had contact with that family. What fortune were they talking about? After the speech, I excused myself from the table and went to the bar. I needed to think, to understand what was happening. It was then that I overheard a conversation that shattered me even more. Hope Caldwell, Lucy's mother, was talking with other elegant women near the bar. Of course we knew David didn't have any family money, she said in that shrill voice that grated on my nerves. His mother is a retired baker living in a rent-controlled apartment. But when the old Harrison died and David inherited that $50 million. $50 million? One of the women asked, impressed. $50 million, Hope confirmed. At first, we thought it was a joke. How could the son of of a woman like Carol, inherit so much money? But the lawyers confirmed it was all legal. David is the sole direct heir. And the mother didn't know anything? Hope laughed cruelly. That poor woman? David says it's better not to tell her anything. Can you imagine if she found out her son was a millionaire? She'd start asking him for money for everything. You know how people of her class are. The other women nodded in understanding. As if it were natural for a multimillionaire son to keep his mother in poverty. Besides, Hope continued, David says he wants his mother to stay humble. That the money would corrupt her. It's better for her to keep living on her $800 Social Security check. It keeps her feet on the ground. I clung to the bar to keep from falling. My legs were shaking so badly I thought I was going to faint. My son was a millionaire. A millionaire. And he had let me live in poverty, worrying about every dollar, taking out loans to pay for his education, selling my mother's jewelry so he could travel. All this time, while I was counting coins to buy medicine for my diabetes, while I was washing clothes by hand because I couldn't afford to fix the washer, while I ate canned lentils to save money. David had $50 million. And not only had he not helped me, he had lied to me. He had deceived me. He had made me believe that he, too, was struggling financially, that he couldn't help me because he had so many expenses. I staggered towards the table where David was sitting, surrounded by his rich friends, laughing at some private joke. When I reached him, he turned with an annoyed expression. What is it, Mom? Can't you see I'm busy? I need to talk to you, I whispered, trying to keep my composure. In private. David sighed dramatically. Mom, it's my wedding. Can't it wait? No, I replied with a firmness that surprised even me. It can't wait. David excused himself from his friends and followed me to a more secluded corner of the ballroom. His expression had changed. He no longer looked annoyed. He looked calculating. What do you want to talk about, Mom? About the $50 million, I said directly, without beating around the bush. David's face transformed completely. For the first time in years, I saw real fear in him. David looked at me for a few seconds that felt like an eternity. I saw his brain working at full speed, searching for a convincing lie, an excuse I would swallow like I had swallowed all the others for years. But this time was different. This time, I already knew the truth. I don't know what you're talking about, Mom, he finally said, trying to sound casual. 50 million? Have you been drinking? Don't take me for a fool, David, I replied, in a voice I didn't recognize. I just heard Lucy's mother telling everyone the details. The inheritance from your grandfather Harrison. The $50 million. Everything. David's mask shattered completely. For a second, I saw genuine panic in his eyes. But then, like a switch being flipped, his expression changed to something much worse, pure contempt. So what if it's true, he said with a coldness that took my breath away. What are you going to do? Make a scene at my wedding? How could you? I whispered, feeling the tears start to well up again. How could you let me live in poverty while you had all that money? David moved closer to me, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. Poverty? Mom, you have a roof over your head, food, and a social security check. There are people who live much worse. 6 months ago, you told me you couldn't lend me $300 for a washing machine. And I couldn't, he retorted without flinching. Not because I didn't have the money, but because it wasn't my obligation to give it to you. I felt as if I had been slapped. Obligation? I'm your mother, David. I raised you alone, I worked 3 jobs to send you to college. And that was your choice, he interrupted me with a cruelty that left me speechless. No one forced you to sacrifice. No one asked you to sell grandma's jewelry or to work cleaning houses. Those were your decisions. I made them for you. To give you a better future. And I appreciate that, he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. But that doesn't make me your personal bank for the rest of my life. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't my son. This wasn't the little boy who cried in my arms when his father left. This was a cruel stranger wearing David's face, but who had lost his soul somewhere along the way. Last year, when I was diagnosed with diabetes and needed medicine. There are generic drugs, he repeated, the same line he'd used then. You don't need the brand name ones. Do you know what it's like to live on $800 a month? Do you know what it's like to choose between buying medicine or buying food? No, he admitted without a trace of shame. And I don't want to know. That's why I work hard and make smart decisions. Smart decisions? Like marrying Lucy for her connections after calling her a fat pig? For the first time, David looked genuinely surprised. You heard that? Everyone heard it, David. The microphone was on. David glanced towards the ballroom, as if assessing the damage his comment might have caused. But when he turned his attention back to me, I saw no regret. I saw irritation. It was a private joke, he said dismissively. Guys make comments like that. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything? That nothing is now your wife. And she's a good wife, he replied as casually as if talking about the weather. She comes from a family with money, she has useful contacts, and she knows her place. Not like you, who's always asking, always needing something. Every word was a knife in my chest. What is my place, David? What is the place of the woman who raised you alone for 24 years? Your place is to be grateful, he said with a coldness that chilled me to the bone. Grateful that I invite you to events like this, grateful that I still want to have a relationship with you, grateful that I haven't cut you off completely like my friends advised. Your friends advised you to cut me off? Of course. Chris, Javier, all of them told me years ago that keeping you around was a mistake. That mothers like you only bring problems. That you'll always be asking for money, reminding me where I came from, embarrassing me in front of important people. I grabbed a nearby chair to keep from falling. I embarrass you. Honestly? David looked me up and down with contempt. Yes. Your old dress, your cheap shoes, the way you talk, how you eat. When my colleagues ask about my family, I tell them my parents died in a car accident. The world stopped around me. All the noise from the ballroom, the music, the conversations, faded away. I could only hear the sound of my own heart breaking into 1,000 pieces. You tell them I'm dead. It's just easier that way, he replied without flinching. I don't have to explain why my mother is a retired baker who lives in Queens. I don't have to justify why I'm not like her, why I don't share her limitations. David, my voice broke completely. I'm your mother. I gave you life. I raised you. I loved you more than my own existence. And I've already paid you back for that, he said with a cruel smile. I gave you a good education, I taught you the value of hard work, I turned you into an independent woman who doesn't need to depend on anyone. Isn't that gratitude enough? Gratitude? Are you telling me that you educated me? In a way, yes. You taught me, unintentionally, everything I didn't want to be. I didn't want to be poor, I didn't want to be limited, I didn't want to settle for less than I deserve. In that sense, you were an excellent teacher. I felt sick. My legs were shaking so much I thought I was going to collapse right there, in the middle of the most elegant ballroom in New York, surrounded by people who considered my existence an inconvenience. Look, Mom, David continued, in a tone that was meant to be conciliatory but sounded condescending. I don't want this to ruin my special day. You can stay for the party, enjoy the free food, meet people. But after today, I think we should space out our meetings. Space out our meetings? A call once in a while, maybe a visit on Christmas. But no money, no handouts, no playing the victim. I have my own life now, my responsibilities, my social standing to maintain. And what about me? David shrugged with an indifference that was more painful than any shout or insult. You have your social security, your apartment, your life. Learn to live with it and stop dreaming of things that don't belong to you. In that moment, something inside me broke. Not just my heart, but something deeper. The image I had of my son, the faith I had held for years that somewhere, inside that cold man, the child I had raised with so much love still existed. You know what, David? I said, and my voice sounded strangely calm. You're right. You're absolutely right. David seemed surprised by my change in tone. I'm glad you understand, Mom. I knew that eventually. No, I interrupted him. I don't understand anything you've said to me. But I understand something much more important. I understand that I lost my son a long time ago, and that the person standing in front of me is a complete stranger. Mom, and I understand one more thing, I continued, feeling a strange sense of liberation. I understand that I don't have to protect you anymore. David's expression changed. For the first time in the entire conversation, I saw something like concern in his eyes. What do you mean by that? I didn't answer David. Instead, I turned and walked towards where Lucy was standing, alone by one of the ballroom windows, looking out over the hotel gardens with a lost expression. Lucy, I called softly. She turned to me, and I could see she had been crying again. Her makeup was smudged at the corners of her eyes, despite the constant touch-ups she had surely received during the afternoon. Mrs. Johnson, she said in a small voice, like a frightened child. How are you enjoying the party? I moved closer to her and lowered my voice. Lucy, did you hear what David said before the ceremony? Lucy's eyes immediately filled with tears. She nodded, unable to speak. Everything, she finally whispered. I heard everything. I was in the next room and, the walls are thin. And you still decided to marry him? Lucy closed her eyes and a tear rolled down her cheek. My father is in debt, Mrs. Johnson. A lot of debt. The restaurants haven't been doing well since the pandemic. David offered to buy all his debt in exchange for this. For marrying you? Not exactly, Lucy wiped her tears with an embroidered handkerchief. My father needed a capital partner to save the family business. David offered him $5 million, but with one condition, that I marry him. I felt a shiver. Your father sold your marriage for $5 million? You don't understand, Mrs. Johnson. It's over 100 jobs. Entire families who depend on those restaurants. If we closed, all those people would be on the street. And you? What about your happiness? Lucy laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. It was the sound someone makes when they've lost all hope. Happiness? Mrs. Johnson, I'm 26, and until 6 months ago, I thought I was going to marry my college boyfriend for love. But when my father explained the situation, when he begged me on his knees to save him, to save all those people's jobs, what could I do? You could have said no. Could I? My father cried, Mrs. Johnson. I saw him cry for the first time in my life. He told me that if I didn't agree, he would have to declare bankruptcy and would probably end up in prison for tax debts. I stood in silence, processing the sheer scale of the manipulation. David hadn't just bought a wife. He had bought an entire family. And your boyfriend? Robert, Lucy smiled sadly. I explained the situation to him. At first, he was furious, he yelled at me, called me a coward. But then he understood I had no choice. He said he would wait, that when I could get a divorce. When you can get a divorce? The prenuptial agreement states that if I divorce him before 5 years, David can reclaim all the money with interest. My father would lose the restaurants anyway. My God, I whispered. You signed a contract? Before the wedding. David insisted. He said it was to protect his financial interests in case of a divorce. Lucy showed me a paper she had folded in her clutch. It was a multi-page legal document, filled with fine print clauses. I skimmed it and felt chills. The contract didn't just stipulate the financial terms of the divorce. It also stated that Lucy could not speak publicly about the terms of the marriage, that David had full control over the family finances, and that any inappropriate behavior on Lucy's part could result in the immediate nullification of the financial agreement. This is monstrous, I murmured. This isn't a marriage, it's legal slavery. I know, Lucy put the paper back in her purse. But it's done. I'm married to him now. Lucy? David's voice came from behind us. What are you doing over here? The guests are asking for the bride. Lucy transformed instantly. Her sad face became a mask of perfect happiness, her posture changed, and she smiled as if she were the happiest woman in the world. I'm coming, honey, she replied in a sweet voice that sounded completely fake. I was just chatting with your mom. David looked at me suspiciously. What were you talking about? About how beautiful Lucy looks, I lied. I was just telling her I've never seen a more elegant bride. David seemed to relax a bit. Well, it's true. Lucy, let's go. My partners want to meet you. Lucy gave me one last look before taking David's arm. In her eyes, I saw a silent plea, but also a resignation that broke my heart. I watched them walk away, David introducing Lucy as if she were a trophy he had won, and her smiling and nodding like a perfectly programmed doll. In that moment, I made a decision. I walked over to the main table, where Lucy's parents were talking with other important guests. Hope Caldwell was telling some anecdote about her last trip to Paris, while Edward, Lucy's father, nodded mechanically with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Excuse me, I said, interrupting the conversation. Could I have a word with Mr. Caldwell? Hope looked at me as if I were a cockroach that had appeared in her salad. I'm sorry? Who are you? I'm Carol Johnson, David's mother. The atmosphere at the table immediately turned cold. Edward looked at me nervously, as if he knew that what I had to say wouldn't be pleasant. Mr. Caldwell, I continued, ignoring the scornful looks from the other guests. I think you should know a few things about my son before it's too late. What kind of things? Edward asked in a trembling voice. Things about how he treats women. Things about his real intentions with your daughter. Hope shot up from her chair like a spring. This is unacceptable. We will not allow some nobody to come here and ruin our children's wedding. A nobody? I repeated, feeling anger begin to bubble up in my chest. Mrs. Caldwell, I am the woman who raised the man your daughter just married, all by myself. I think that gives me some authority to speak on his character. Edward. Hope turned to her husband. Do something? This woman is making a scene. But Edward was looking at me with a different expression. I saw something in his eyes I recognized immediately, the look of a desperate father who knows he has made a terrible mistake but doesn't know how to fix it. What do you mean? He asked me quietly. I leaned closer to him, close enough for only him to hear. Your daughter heard my son call her a fat pig 5 minutes before the ceremony. And still, she married him because you emotionally blackmailed her. Edward turned pale. I didn't. You sold your daughter for $5 million, I continued relentlessly. And my son bought her as if she were a piece of property. Do you really think this is going to end well? The debts. Edward began to stammer. The employees, the families. There are other ways to save a business, Mr. Caldwell. Ways that don't involve sacrificing your daughter's happiness. Edward looked at me, his eyes full of tears. "What have I done?" he whispered. "My God, what have I done?" Just then, David appeared at our table. He had seen the conversation from afar and his face showed a contained fury. "Mom," he said in a dangerously calm voice. "I think it's time for you to leave." "Excuse me?" "You've had too much to drink," David continued, raising his voice just enough for other guests to hear. "You're saying nonsensical things and bothering my guests. I think you need to rest." I just stared at him, watching him lie as easily as he breathed. Some guests began to murmur among themselves, clearly believing I was a drunk mother causing trouble at her son's wedding. "I haven't had a single drop of alcohol," I said clearly. "Mom, please." David moved closer, placing a hand on my arm with false gentleness. "Don't make this any harder than it already is." It was in that moment that I realized something fundamental. David was afraid. Afraid that I would say something that would ruin his perfect image in front of all these important people. Afraid that his mask would fall. And for the first time in 24 years, I had power over him. "All right, David," I said with a smile that surprised even me. "I'll leave. But first, I want to give you my wedding gift." David looked confused. "A gift? Mom, you don't need to." "I insist," I said, taking out my cell phone. "It's something very special. Something I think all your guests will appreciate." And then, in front of the entire head table, I played the recording I had made of our private conversation. David's voice began to play from my phone, crisp and clear in the silence that had fallen over the main table. "So what if it's true? What are you going to do? Make a scene at my wedding?" Then my voice, broken and hurt, "How could you let me live in poverty while you had all that money?" And then, the answer that chilled the blood of everyone present: "Poverty? Mom, you have a roof over your head, food, and a social security check. There are people who live much worse." The silence spread like a shockwave. One by one, guests at nearby tables stopped talking and turned towards us. The music was still playing, but more and more people stopped dancing to listen. Edward Caldwell was completely white. Hope's mouth was hanging open. Other guests were whispering, some taking out their own phones to record the scene. But the recording continued. "No one forced you to sacrifice. No one asked you to sell grandma's jewelry or to work cleaning houses. Those were your decisions. I made them for you. To give you a better future. And I appreciate that. But that doesn't make me your personal bank for the rest of my life." David tried to grab my phone, but I moved away. His face had gone from white to a deep red. Some of his friends moved closer, but the crowd that had formed around us kept them at a distance. The recording reached the cruelest part. "I embarrass you?" "Honestly? Yes. Your old dress, your cheap shoes, the way you talk, how you eat. When my colleagues ask about my family, I tell them my parents died in a car accident." A murmur of horror rippled through the crowd. Someone shouted, "Oh my God," from the back. I saw several guests cover their mouths in disbelief. Edward Caldwell shot up from his chair as if he'd been hit by an electric shock. "What is the meaning of this?" he yelled, looking at David with fury. "You told your mother she was dead?" "I can explain." David started, but the recording kept playing. "It's just easier that way. I don't have to explain why my mother is a retired baker who lives in Queens. I don't have to justify why I'm not like her, why I don't share her limitations." "Enough!" David roared, trying to grab my phone again. But this time it was Chris, his best man, who stopped him. "Let it finish, David," Chris said in an icy voice I had never heard from him before. "I think we all need to hear this." The recording continued to the end, including the part where David told me we should space out our meetings, and that he had his social standing to maintain. When it finished, the silence was deafening. More than 100 people were staring at us with a mixture of horror, disgust, and sympathy for me. David was looking at me with a pure hatred that gave me chills. "How dare you," he muttered through clenched teeth. "How dare you humiliate me like this?" "Humiliate you?" I repeated, and for the first time in years, my voice sounded firm and confident. "David, I didn't humiliate you. You humiliated yourself." Edward Caldwell walked up to David, his fists clenched. "You son of a bitch," he screamed. "You've turned my daughter into a high-class prostitute." "Edward!" Hope exclaimed. "Control yourself." "Control myself?" Edward turned to his wife, tears in his eyes. "Hope, this man bought our daughter. And we sold her to him." At that moment, Lucy appeared through the crowd. She had heard the shouting and came running. When she saw the horrified faces of all the guests, when she saw her father crying and David looking panicked, she understood immediately what had happened. "What's going on?" she asked in a trembling voice. "Your new husband," Edward said bitterly, "has just shown what kind of man he really is." Lucy looked at me, and I nodded. I played a recording of a conversation I had with David a few minutes ago. A conversation where he explains exactly what he thinks of women, of marriage, and of family. "What did he say?" Lucy whispered. Before I could answer, Chris stepped forward. He said your mother advised him to cut all contact with you, he said to David with contempt. He said mothers like yours only bring problems. He said he tells people his parents are dead. Chris turned to Lucy. And if that's the respect he has for the woman who raised him, just imagine the respect he's going to have for you. Lucy looked at me with tear-filled eyes. Is it true? I nodded. Everything you heard before the ceremony, Lucy. The fat pig comment, the marriage out of charity, that was just the beginning. David tried to get closer to Lucy, but she recoiled. Lucy, honey, don't listen to them. They're twisting everything. I was angry, I said things I didn't mean. You didn't mean to say them? Lucy looked at him with a coldness I hadn't seen in her before. Like you didn't mean to say, fat pig? Like you didn't mean to make me sign a contract as if I were your employee? Some guests murmured, contract, among themselves. The story was getting more scandalous by the second. Lucy, please. David tried to take her arm, but she pulled away violently. Don't touch me, she screamed, her voice echoing through the ballroom. Don't you ever touch me again. Edward moved to his daughter's side. Lucy, we're leaving. Right now. Dad, we can't, Lucy was crying openly. The contract, the restaurants, everything would be lost. To hell with the restaurants. Edward shouted with a vehemence that surprised everyone. I will not allow my daughter to spend one more day married to this monster. Edward, think about what you're saying, Hope intervened. Think of the financial consequences. Hope. Edward spun on his wife, furious. You knew. You knew what kind of man he was and you still pushed for this marriage. I didn't know any of this. Hope began. Liar, a voice from the crowd interrupted. It was one of the elegant women Hope had been talking to earlier. Hope, you yourself told us that David considered his mother a burden. You laughed when you said he kept her in poverty so she wouldn't be corrupted. Hope went pale. The crowd began to murmur louder, clearly outraged. David tried to take control of the situation. This is ridiculous, he shouted. It's all gossip and misunderstandings. This is all my mother's fault, she's always been a manipulator. It was then that Chris, his supposed best friend, walked up to him and spoke in a low voice, but audible to everyone nearby. David, I have a mother too. And if I ever treated her the way you've treated yours, I wouldn't be able to look at myself in the mirror. You're a monster. Chris. David looked genuinely shocked. You know me. You know I'm not like that. Oh, really? Chris took out his own phone. Do you want me to play the times you've made fun of your mother in front of us? The times you've said she was a burden? The times you've said she embarrasses you? David was speechless. He looked around, searching for support among his friends, but they all looked at him with contempt. Even those who had laughed at his cruel comments now seemed horrified to have been accomplices. Lucy came over to me. Mrs. Johnson, she said with a broken voice, I am so sorry for all of this. I'm sorry you had to go through this. Don't you apologize, child, I replied, taking her hands in mine. You're a victim here too. No, Lucy shook her head. I'm a coward. I should have been brave from the start. I should have said no. Edward joined us. Lucy, we are leaving now. And first thing tomorrow, we're calling a lawyer. This marriage is being annulled. The contracts. Lucy murmured. Contracts signed under duress and deception are null and void, a voice came from the crowd. It was an older, well-dressed man. I'm a lawyer. And I can assure you that no judge in this country would validate a marriage based on emotional blackmail and predatory contracts. David looked desperate. This can't be happening. I paid for this wedding. I held up my end of the deal. Your end of the deal? I repeated, looking at him in disbelief. Do you hear yourself? You're talking about your wife as if she's a business transaction. Because she is. David yelled, completely losing his composure. Everything in life is a transaction. I pay, she gives me what I need. You raised me, I give you a roof. That's how the world works. The silence that followed those words was absolute. Even the music had stopped. David had revealed his true nature in front of more than 100 witnesses. Lucy took off her wedding rings and threw them at David's feet. Enjoy your money, she said with a dignity that impressed me. Because it's the only thing you're ever going to have in your life. Edward took his daughter by the arm. Let's go, Lucy. We have nothing more to do here. As father and daughter walked towards the exit, the crowd parted to let them pass. Some people even applauded. Hope followed them, but before she left, she turned to David. I hope you know that this is over. Everything. The money, the restaurants, any kind of relationship between our families. And when this hits the papers tomorrow, your reputation will be ruined. David was left alone in the center of the ballroom, surrounded by guests who looked at him with contempt and disgust. Some started to leave. Others lingered, clearly waiting to see what would happen next. It was then that David turned to me with a fury that scared me. This is your fault, he screamed. You've ruined my life. Everything I've built, everything I've worked for, you've destroyed it. No, David, I answered with a calm that surprised me. You ruined your own life. I just refused to be an accomplice to your cruelty anymore. And then, David did something I never thought he would do. He walked up to me and pushed me so hard that I fell to the floor. The crowd's gasp of horror was immediate. Several men lunged at David to restrain him, while a few women helped me to my feet. He pushed his own mother, someone yelled. Call the police. David seemed to realize the magnitude of what he had done. He looked around, saw all the horrified and disgusted faces, saw the phones recording everything, and for the first time that night, I saw real fear in his eyes. I didn't mean to. He stammered. But it was too late. A 64-year-old mother, pushed to the ground by her own son at his wedding. It was an image no one would ever forget. And I, surprisingly, felt free for the first time in 24 years. 3 months after that night at the Plaza Hotel, I woke up in my small Astoria apartment without the crushing weight I had carried in my chest for so many years. The August sun streamed through my bedroom window, illuminating the cardboard boxes stacked by the door. Today was my moving day. After what happened at the wedding, my life changed in ways I never would have imagined. The videos from that night went viral on every social media platform. The mother who exposed her millionaire son's cruelty, the groom who pushed his mom at his own wedding, New York's most scandalous wedding. The headlines varied, but they all told the same story. And although I was embarrassed by all the attention at first, I soon realized I had struck a deep chord with thousands of people. Mothers who had been mistreated by ungrateful children, women who had sacrificed everything for families who didn't value them, parents who had given everything and received contempt in return. My mailbox filled up with letters. Hundreds of them. Women from all over the country wrote to me, telling me their own stories, thanking me for having the courage to say out loud what they had suffered in silence. One letter in particular changed my life. It was from Mercedes Ruiz, a businesswoman from Charleston who had built a bakery empire after her own son kicked her out of the house for being a burden. In her letter, she wrote, Carol, I saw your story and I saw myself 20 years ago. If you're willing to start over, I have a proposal for you. Mercedes offered me something I never thought I'd have at 64, a new beginning. She wanted me to manage one of her bakeries in a beautiful town in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina. The house was included, along with a good salary, and the chance to do what I truly loved, to cook and to feed people. But I don't want you coming as an employee, Mercedes had told me when we met in person. I want you to come as a partner. Your experience is worth more than money, Carol. Besides, I think we both deserve to build something that is truly ours. So there I was, packing the few objects that really mattered to start a new life in a place where no one knew me as David's mother, where I could just be Carol. As I was folding my clothes, the buzzer rang. It was Lucy. Since the night of the wedding, we had developed an unexpected friendship. She had managed to get the marriage annulled without any issues, just as the lawyer at the wedding had predicted. The contracts signed under duress had been declared void, and David hadn't been able to claim a cent. Ready for the big adventure? Lucy asked with a smile. She had changed a lot in these 3 months, too. She had lost that broken doll fragility and regained the strength I had seen in her eyes the first time I met her. More than ready, I replied, taping up the last box. And you? How are preparations going for your trip? Lucy had taken the annulment as a second chance. With the money David hadn't been able to touch, since he himself had breached the contract terms by exhibiting inappropriate behavior, she had decided to fulfill a childhood dream, studying culinary arts in Paris. Flight leaves tomorrow, she said with excitement. I still can't believe I'm doing this. And Robert? Lucy's face lit up. Robert, her college boyfriend, had been waiting for her all this time. He's coming with me. He got into an architecture program at the Sorbonne. We're going to start over together in Paris. I teared up seeing the genuine happiness in her eyes. It was so different from the empty expression she wore on her wedding day. Have you heard anything about your father? He's doing much better, Lucy smiled. After the whole scandal, a lot of investors stepped up to help him. In the end, it turned out he didn't need David's dirty money. Honesty and hard work always find their reward. And your mother? Lucy sighed. That's another story. Hope still isn't speaking to me. She says I ruined the opportunity of a lifetime. But Dad and I are good, and that's what matters. As we finished loading my boxes into the moving truck Mercedes had sent, Lucy asked me the question I knew was coming. Have you heard anything from David? I stayed silent for a moment. Yes, I finally admitted. He called me a week ago. What did he want? To apologize. Or at least, that's what he said. I remembered that awkward conversation. He told me he's been going to therapy, that he realized his mistakes, that he wanted to repair our relationship. And what did you tell him? I told him I was glad he was trying to change, but that the damage was already done. That some things can't be fixed with an apology. It was true. David had lost his job after the scandal. His reputation in the business world was destroyed. Some of his friends had abandoned him completely. The money was still there, but he had realized that money alone wasn't enough to buy respect or love. "Do you think he can really change?" Lucy asked me. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "And it's no longer my responsibility to find out. For 24 years I tried to save him, protect him, guide him. Now it's up to him to decide what kind of man he wants to be." The truck was ready. The driver, an older man with a kind face, told me we could head out whenever I wanted. Before getting in, took one last look at my empty apartment. I had spent the last 20 years of my life there. There, I had cried over David's absences, counted coins to make ends meet, dreamed of better days that never seemed to come. But it had also been my refuge, my little space of freedom. And although I was leaving with hope for the future, I felt a pang of nostalgia for all the memories, good and bad, that I was leaving behind in Queens. "Ready, Miss Johnson?" the driver asked. "Ready," I replied, climbing into the cab. The drive down south took all day. As the New York skyline faded in the rearview mirror, I felt like I was leaving behind not just a city, but an entire life that no longer belonged to me. Stony Creek was exactly as Mercedes had described it, a beautiful small town nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, with brick-front shops and Victorian houses that looked like they belonged in a storybook. The bakery was on Main Street, right across from the town square and its white gazebo. Mercedes was waiting for me at the door, smiling as if we were old friends. "Carol, you're finally here." Mercedes Ruiz was a woman my age, but she radiated an energy I had lost years ago and was just beginning to recover. She had built her business from scratch after divorcing a husband who belittled her, and had single-handedly raised 3 children who now adored her and helped run her business empire from Charleston. "Come on, let me show you your new kingdom," she said, leading me inside the bakery. The place was gorgeous. Professional deck ovens, wooden shelves that smelled of fresh dough, large windows filling the space with natural light. In the back, there was a modern yet cozy kitchen, perfect for developing new recipes. "And upstairs is your home," Mercedes continued, guiding me up some wooden stairs that creaked slightly under our feet. The apartment was small but perfect. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen overlooking Main Street, a living room with a stone fireplace, and a small porch from where you could see the mountains. "It's perfect," I murmured, stepping out onto the porch. Below, people were walking their dogs in the square while neighbors chatted on benches. It was the quiet life I had always dreamed of. "We start tomorrow," Mercedes told me. "But today, rest, explore the town, meet your new neighbors. They're going to love you, you'll see." That first night in Stony Creek, I sat on my new porch with a glass of cheap wine and a quiche I had warmed up from the supplies Mercedes left in my fridge. The silence of the mountains was so different from the constant noise of New York. Here I could hear my own thoughts without the constant bombardment of worries and responsibilities that had defined my life for so many years. For the first time in decades, I didn't have to worry about anyone but myself. I didn't have to cook for an ungrateful son, I didn't have to count every dollar, I didn't have to swallow humiliations to keep the family peace. I was free. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Lucy in Paris, "First class in French cuisine tomorrow. I can't believe I'm here. Robert says hi. How's your new life?" I replied, "Just arrived, but I already feel at home. Enjoy Paris, you deserve it." Then came another message, this one from a number I didn't have saved but recognized immediately. It was David. "Mom, I know you don't want to talk to me, but I want you to know I'm trying to change. The therapist says I have serious issues with empathy and narcissism. I'm going 3 times a week. I know it's probably too late, but I wanted you to know." I read the message 3 times before responding, "I'm glad to hear you're seeking help. I wish you the best in your healing process." I didn't add, "I love you," or "I hope we can fix things." Because even though a part of me, the part that will always be his mother, wanted him to change and be happy, I also knew that my happiness could no longer depend on his redemption. I slept better that night than I had in years. And when I woke up the next morning with the sun coming through my window and the smell of bread already baking downstairs, I knew I had made the right decision. My new life was beginning. 1 year later, I'm standing in my bakery in Stony Creek, kneading dough for tomorrow's loaves. It's 5 in the morning, but I no longer feel the tiredness as a burden. It's the satisfying fatigue of someone working on something they love, for people who appreciate them. The Carol and Mercedes bakery has become the heart of the town. We don't just sell bread, we've created a space where moms come for coffee after dropping their kids off at school, where folks gather in the afternoons to swap stories, where young families find the warmth of home. Mercedes was right, the neighbors loved me from day one. Maybe because they see something in me they recognize, that quiet strength of women who have suffered a lot but keep going. Or maybe simply because I make the best sourdough bread in the entire county. This morning, as I need, I think about everything that has changed in these 12 months. My apartment upstairs no longer feels empty. The walls are full of new photos. Mercedes and I the day we officially opened as partners, the local kids and the baking workshop I host on Saturdays, the ladies from the book club that meets in our back room every Thursday. And there's also a new photo of Lucy and Robert, taken at a cafe in Montmartre, with the Eiffel Tower in the background. She looks radiant, completely different from the frightened bride I knew a year ago. In her last letter, she told me she's studying French pastry and that Robert proposed again, this time for true love, without contracts or blackmail. When I finish my studies here, we want to come back to the States and open our own pastry shop, she wrote. And if it's okay with you, we'd like it to be in Stony Creek. I feel like that's where I belong now, close to the woman who taught me what it means to be brave. The bakery door chimes. It's Mrs. Higgins, the retired teacher who lives next door. She comes every day at 5:30 for breakfast before her morning walk. Good morning, Carol, she greets me with that smile that makes any day start well. The usual? Black coffee and a slice of sourdough toast with local honey, I confirm, already preparing her breakfast. How did you sleep? Like a baby, she replies, sitting at her favorite table by the window. I got a letter from my granddaughter in Seattle yesterday. She's getting married in the spring. How wonderful. Are they celebrating here in town? Of course. The whole family is coming. And of course, you're going to make the wedding cake. I smile as I pour her coffee. These little joys, these moments of genuine connection with people who value me for who I am and not for what I can give them, are what fill my life with meaning now. At 7, Mercedes arrives with her usual energy. Good morning, partner, she shouts from the door. Ready for another day of conquering the world one loaf at a time? Mercedes has become more than a business partner. She's the sister I never had, the friend who understands me without need for explanations. She also went through her own family hell, and we have both found in this second chance not just a successful business, but a friendship that sustains us. The orders for the Miller wedding are ready, I inform her as she puts on her apron. And this afternoon the ladies from the town council are coming to taste samples for the fall festival. Perfect. And don't forget that today at 6 we have the meeting with the bank. They're going to approve the loan for the expansion, I'm sure of it. The expansion. After just 1 year, our little bakery has been so successful that we're planning to open a second location in nearby Asheville. We also want to add a small cafe serving homemade comfort food using our bread. It's incredible to think that a year ago I was a 64-year-old woman with no money, no home of my own, and no hope. And now I am co-owner of a thriving business, with growth plans and a future full of possibilities. At 9, Leo, the 8-year-old son of the Thompson family, comes running in. He's always late for school because he stops to play in the square. Carol. Mom says I can get a muffin for recess, he yells with that urgency only children have. And the math homework I helped you with yesterday? I ask, feigning seriousness. Leo pulls a crumpled notebook from his backpack. The problems are all correct. During these months, I've started helping some of the town's children with their homework in the afternoons, after closing the bakery. It's something that happened naturally when Leo's mother mentioned he was struggling with numbers. Perfect. You've earned the muffin, I tell him, putting his favorite, chocolate chip, into a bag. As Leo runs out toward the school, I think about how different this relationship is from the one with my son. Here there are no unreasonable expectations, no sacrifices that leave me empty. Just the simple pleasure of helping a child learn, seeing him smile, knowing that I am a positive presence in his life. Mid-morning, while I'm decorating a birthday cake, my phone rings. It's a New York number I don't recognize. Hello? Carol Johnson? Yes, this is she. Good morning, Ms. Johnson. I'm Sarah Jenkins, a producer for the podcast Brave New Chapters. We're calling because we'd like to do a feature on your story and your new life in North Carolina. I sigh. Although the media frenzy from the wedding has passed, every now and then I still get calls from journalists wanting to tell my story. Ms. Jenkins, I appreciate the interest, but I've already said everything I had to say on that subject. I understand, Ms. Johnson. But we don't want to focus on the past. We want to showcase your present, your resilience, how you've built a new life. We believe your story can inspire many women going through similar situations. I pause to think. Mercedes, who has heard the conversation, is gesturing, encouraging me to accept. Would it be here, in town? Yes, we'd like to show the bakery, your new life, maybe interview some neighbors to talk about how they know you now. All right, I decide finally. But on one condition, I don't want to talk about my son. This story is about my new life, not my past. After hanging up, Mercedes smiles at me. It's good for people to see that life doesn't end at 64. That you can always start over. She's right. For decades I thought my only purpose in life was to be a mother. When that relationship broke, I thought I had nothing left. But now I know I have many other identities. I am a businesswoman, I am a friend, I am a neighbor, I am a mentor, I am an independent woman. In the evening, after closing the bakery, I go up to my apartment to make dinner. It's a ritual I've learned to enjoy, cooking just for myself, eating without haste, without having to cater to anyone else's tastes or needs. While I cook, an email arrives on my phone. It's from David. Mom, I know you don't want contact with me, but I wanted to tell you that I've started volunteering at a senior center. The therapist says I need to learn empathy from the ground up, and that caring for older people will help me understand what you went through all those years. I'm also donating half of my inheritance to organizations that help single mothers. I know it doesn't change anything I did to you, but I want you to know I'm trying to be a better person. I don't expect your forgiveness, I just wanted you to know that your teachings didn't fall on deaf ears, even if it took me 30 years to understand. I read the email 3 times. A part of me, the part that will be his mother forever, feels proud that he is finally doing something good with his life. But another part, the part that learned to protect herself, knows that my happiness can no longer depend on his decisions. I reply, I'm glad to hear you're finding ways to help others. I hope it brings you the peace you're looking for. I add nothing else. Because I learned that forgiving doesn't mean opening the door again to the person who hurt you. It means freeing yourself from resentment, but maintaining the boundaries that protect your new happiness. That night, like every night since I arrived in Stony Creek, I go out onto my porch with a glass of wine. The town is quiet, the lights from the houses creating a warm mosaic in the darkness. Down in the square, some teenagers are gathered around the bandstand, laughing. I think about the woman I was a year ago, scared, broken, hopeless. And I think about the woman I am now, strong, independent, surrounded by people who love me for who I am. My phone vibrates with a text from Lucy, Carol, Robert, and I have set a date for the wedding, June of next year, in Stony Creek. Would you be my maid of honor? I don't have a mother to support me, but I have something better, I have you. My eyes fill with tears, but they are tears of happiness. This is the family I chose, the family that chose me. Not the blood family that hurt me, but the heart family that heals me. I reply, it would be an honor. Because sometimes, the best families aren't the ones you're given at birth, but the ones you build when you finally learn to value yourself. As I finish my glass of wine under the Blue Ridge stars, I ask myself a question I never thought I'd ask. Have you ever lived through a similar situation, where you had to choose between continuing to endure mistreatment from someone you love or defending your own dignity? If your answer is yes, I want you to know that you are not alone. And if you haven't yet found the courage to take that step, I hope my story reminds you that it is never too late to start over. If this story touched your heart, leave a like and subscribe to the channel so this message reaches someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes, all we need is to know that there is hope after the pain.